Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. We're going to talk about a word that some of you, including myself, have accused of being a dirty word, and that is the word empowerment. You might be saying, what, Kristina? Isn't this what you do? Don't you help teams or leaders empower their teams? I do, but I think it is one of those words that gets overused, overplayed, and most certainly misused. And it's a problem because it is such a good thing to do. And it's so important when we talk about delegation and creating strong teams to create empowered team members and empowered teams. The problem is when we don't understand what that means and we just use it like a buzzword, then we get in trouble. Then we give people like me a bad name because we're speaking like the latest buzzword, the latest slang, and we're jumping on the bandwagon of something that everybody says is great, but when we are not aligned with what it really means, then we get lip service. And I do not want my listening leaders and business owners out there, I don't want you to be accused of just having lip service. I want you to have the real thing. So let's talk about this word empowerment. All right, so just getting back to the root, the definition, and maybe this is not the root, I'm not going to go back to the Greek or anything, but the definition of empowerment is actually giving authority or power to someone to do something. So authority and power. These are these two key words that I want you to think about. When you delegate a task, do you give that person authority over the task, over the project, over anything? What do they have authority over? What did you give them authority over? Did you give them power? Did you give them what kind of power? What level of power did you give them? Are we actually transferring these authority and power things over to the person we're delegating to, or to the team that we're delegating to, or even to, let's say, the supplier we've delegated to? If we haven't been clear, then we're not empowering these people. We're not empowering even our kids if we don't give them authority and power over something, right? And I'm going to get into what that looks like in real life. But first, let's talk about the reasons we don't empower people. One big reason is fear, and the other big reason is unknown. So let's talk about the fear end of it. A lot of people are afraid to let go. So they're afraid to let go of the task. They're afraid to let go of the control. And I can't blame you because so many leaders have grown this thing from, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, and now you're asking someone else to do it. So there are systems and there are things to transfer it to get that, as close to get to the same result that you did. But people are unique and no one can do it exactly the same. So that's a key little nuance there. But most of the time it's because we're afraid to let go. And that can be really hard. But realizing what it is that you're trying to get them to do can help with that. And if we do some of the things we're going to talk about later on in the episode, that will help with that as well. The second thing I see very often is that we're afraid this whole thing is just going to spiral out of control. If we give power and authority to other people, then we're going to lose all control. It's going to be the tail wagging the dog, and it's going to be this horrible thing. There was a big push, probably in the 90s and 2000s, right, to transfer everything over to teams. So workplace teams. And what the idea was is to create empowered teams. And this, in theory, would be made up of empowered individuals and all would be wonderful. But people kind of got it skewed, right? Like they didn't do that part right. And what you get is all these like teams like doing whatever the heck they wanted, trying to like set up weird shifts and trying to like, have this kind of weird project over here and this party over here. And, So they let it go to an extent that was too much, right? It was too much power and too much authority. And so there is a fear that as the leader or as the owner of the business, that you're going to lose all control. So there's a definite fear there. Again, warranted, right? Warranted from those previous experiences, warranted just from the fact that, like, how are they going to know how to do the thing, right? Or how am I going to maintain control? All warranted stuff. And the last one, and I've kind of nuanced on it in the first two, but we're not very sure or haven't really clarified what exactly we're giving them control and power or authority and power over. So when we fail to explain, like, where their power ends, if you're watching on the YouTube, you're going to see me going back and forth with my hands. So I apologize on the audio only, but we can give people a project and we can give them ultimate control of the project, or we can give them some control of the project. Either way, we have to define it and we have to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Because if I think I'm giving you some control and you think you get ultimate control, there will likely be a difference in outcome from what I expect. So we need to define it. And most importantly, as a leader, you need to define that in your mind. If you're handing something to somebody and you say, I want you to be empowered to have control, explain to them exactly what it is you want control or you want them to control. Because if we say you get to have control over your work, and they think, sweet, I can make my own schedule, and that was not in your realm of what you thought, you're going to have problems. And they're going to think they're totally fine and you're going to think they're out to lunch, literally. So you have to clarify that. But that's definitely a block, because a lot of times we don't think about it. We think if we're going to assign a task, we assign a task. And obviously they're going to know exactly what I'm thinking. And it's so obvious to you that you might forget to transfer that knowledge to them or to even clarify things, because we think all in a certain way. And the assumption is that so does everybody else. But if you've listened to any of my other episodes, obviously we're all different. The Lord made us differently. And here we are. We're going to operate differently, but that just means we have to communicate our expectations to one another. Hugely important. Okay, so how do we fix this? How do we get over these fears and these unknowns? And how do we actually do empowerment correctly? The biggest thing, and the one word I want you to remember, is clarity. Clarity. Yes. We need to be extremely clear about, well, a number of things, but some very few, very specific things in order to clearly communicate what we want someone to have control and authority over. And the thing is, when we're very clear about that up front, everyone's like, cool, I get to own this. The problem usually comes, and this disgruntled feeling comes, is when you're giving power and authority over something and you're not that clear what it is, and they think it's bigger, and then you start shrinking it down, right? So you have to be very clear about what that is. And usually it's better to start off small and grow rather than to start off huge and shrink. So keep that in mind. All right, so what do we need to be clear on? So the very first thing that we need to be clear on is the goal. Okay, so what is it that we're doing? So this encompasses both the big goal, so your strategic direction, the why in the world this whole business exists, those really big goals, annual goals, like medium-term goals, and especially the goal that you are allowing someone to have the power and control over. Okay, so be very, very clear. What is the goal? What do you want them to do? Is it a project? Is it a task? What is it? And to what extent? So being very clear on that what part. Next, we need to be extremely clear on the values. So what are the values of your team? What are the values of your family? What are the values you expect from the people who are doing things for you? These are hugely important because, again, whenever we are empowering someone to take over some portion of our business, our lives, or whatever it might be, they now become an extension of us. So when we think about leadership, I get this vision in my head of like a giant octopus. I don't know why it's an octopus, but this is my vision. You see the inner workings of my brain today. But I get a vision of a giant octopus, and like team members and suppliers and other branches and all of that are like all extensions of the leader. So think about like how much longer your arms are going to reach and how many more arms you're going to have when you've got other people doing things. And ultimately, it's all centered around you. So what that means is that everybody needs to encompass your same values, because ultimately, if a Joe Schmo over in, the North District or whatever that's operating as your salesperson is not operating on the up and up, now you are crooked. You see what I mean? Like they have to embody those same values as you do. So it's important that you've communicated that, and it's important that you've hired for that. It's important that you've delegated that to people, and it's important that you have instilled that into your team, into your family. So if you're looking at my strategies, 6 critical questions. So the first one is, why do we exist? This one is, how do we behave, right? So very clear on that again. And the third thing is we need to be very clear on the how. So this one is quite involved. So give me a few minutes to describe this one. Very, very clear on the how we're going to work. So what does it look like for us to communicate together? So if I'm delegating to you, how do you know exactly what I'm telling you to do? So how are we communicating that? How do you tell me if there's a problem? When do we talk? What is the escalation system that we're going to work within? How much money do you get, right? There's budgets that get in there. So this is really your ways of working and your ways of operating. So if you're a company, you've got some processes in place. Some of this might already be there because you've got, let's say, an expense report process. So, okay, you spend the money, you put it into here, you get it back. Like that's, very clear how that works. But if you're now assigning tasks to people and you're, divvying out what kind of purchasing power they have, and you don't have that written down anywhere, you need to be clear. Okay, so what, $1,000, anything less than that, you just spend, right? It's fine as long as you don't go over your budget at the end of the month. But anything bigger than that, we're going to escalate for approvals or whatever that might be, right? Like there's going to be nuances, but the most important ones you want to get, because these first couple are like kind of budget line items, right? These are kind of standard flows. But how are you communicating? At what time are you communicating? How do you still maintain your kind of like brain on the amoeba, right? You've got to have like a check and balance system in place. And some great ways to do that. Number one is that one-on-one meeting with the leader. So you should be, as a leader, having regular sit-down sessions that don't talk about necessarily all of the business and all the things, but just actual sit-down sessions where you talk about, how are you doing? How are things? Within that, you're going to probably touch on some goals or touch on some projects and say, how is that going? But you need to have that style of communication regularly. And I say regularly without any consistent thing, because it's really going to depend on experience levels. It's going to depend on locations. It's going to depend on like what level of work they're at. But typically, I would say every other week to a month time frame in between. So at least monthly, that's going to keep a good cadence. We're having some good check-in time. Weekly is really awesome if you have that time and you are capable of doing it, particularly if this person is new or in a new role or taking on a new task. Hugely, hugely beneficial to do weekly at that point. But when you start getting teams like 7-ish and more, it might be a bit cumbersome to do everybody every single week. So just be realistic with it. But regular sit-down sessions where you're actually speaking. And, I get told this a lot, that I talk to my people every day. It's fine. I don't need to sit down one-on-one with them. We talk to them every day. I want you to think about spouses and marriages, and why are like date nights so important? Why are business family meetings, like Sunday night meetings to plan your week or whatever, why are those things so important? Because in passing, you don't talk about the details. In passing, you can kind of get hey, I'm going to pick this one up here and move this one from there to there. And, we'll have dinner at this time. And yeah, it's chicken again. Okay. So you're going to talk about that stuff, but you're not going to see how the person is doing. You're not going to get that quality time. You're not going to get any deeper unless you sit down and take some time with them. So keep that in mind. If you've taken a training session with me, I always say coaching sessions are like G-rated dating, right? So you've got to do that with your team members. And your team members should do that kind of stuff with each other as well, because it helps to clarify these sorts of things. So along with those kind of one-on-one coaching sessions, you should have some kind of a mechanism for understanding the metrics of whatever it is you've assigned. So even if you've empowered them and they have full on control, full authority, full power over the thing that you've given them, you need some kind of a mechanism to see how it's going. This might seem obvious, but you would be surprised how often it's not done. So some kind of a how do you know it's winning dashboard thing that gets reported up to you and gets reviewed and spoken about. So if it's just getting sent to you, that's probably not enough. You want to see it sent to you. You want to have some kind of a time when they speak to you about it and you have an opportunity to ask some questions. So that might be a weekly meeting. That might be a monthly like report out meeting, depending on, what level, again, this project or this empowerment is. You want to have that level. You want to have some kind of communication of that. I always refer things back to like when we were working on shop floor empowered teams back in manufacturing, we would have dashboards or primary visual displays, so PVD boards, and the metrics would be there. So you'd have daily report outs. You could even get hourly measurement of how things are going. Were we really empowered? No, not really. But we had a lot of gaps in there. But we had some kind of a mechanism where we were able to get that feedback on a regular basis and be able to kind of have a two-way feedback so we could make sure that questions were answered in a timely fashion, make sure we caught things as they were going off the rails before they went too far off, so they were unfixable. But you have to have those kind of mechanisms in place even though you've empowered somebody. So it's so important to have these conversations up front so that they understand, hey, that's part of your empowerment is you're going to report up to me still. Right? You've got to tell me how things are. So you do these things. You get all this clarity on the goal, on how people operate, and on how you're going to operate together. You're off to a great start for starting that empowerment. The next levels that you're going to get down to are into our belief systems, into, how do we transition them from like, hey, I've always done what I've been told, into I do own this. So when you're handing something over to somebody, you have to actually allow that space to go there, right? So these 3 clarity things are going to help you maybe be able to let go easier, but you still have to allow them to take it on. So you need to be clear in your head as well and help them to see what that actually looks like. And that comes in when we start looking at mindset and creating safe spaces and really like digging in through those one-on-one coaching sessions so that we can start to really dig into, okay, what's getting in the way of them taking control and taking authority over it and helping to either alleviate any misunderstandings that there might be or to get over whatever hump is in there. So I'm going to do another podcast that gets more into mindset, but these are some things like after you've clarified kind of the nuts and bolts, now we need to work on mindsets and thought processes and how we go. And so this goes back to the thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and results wheel that I talk about so much. But if you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, share it with a friend, leave a comment on the YouTube, and leave a review on whatever podcast app you're watching it on, preferably Spotify and Apple's. So leave those so that more people can get the word out, because I just want to educate leaders, because when we have wonderful leaders, we have wonderful teams and wonderful lives. So spread the word, get everybody on board, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.